Like most British people, like most people, I grew up with television. I wished I'd gone to Grange Hill. I was terrified by Threads. I was hooked on Cracker, and I got caught up in State of Play. These stories, these characters, these lives, thrilling, compelling, heartbreaking. I grew up in the 1970s and 80s in a pretty ordinary family with my brother and sister. My dad worked for BP, and my mum was a nurse and a housewife. Dad was the first in his family to go to university, and in another era, I suspect my mum would have had a great career too. My dad loves movies, music, TV, and he wrote comedy sketches for his college review company. My mum has read almost every book in print and has a general knowledge to rival Richard Osman's. They were, I now realise, frustrated creatives. As a result, they provided us with a glorious cultural education. Every holiday, museums and monuments, prehistoric sites, National Trust properties, endlessly. It was my father who really ignited the love of performance and storytelling that my siblings and I share. One evening, he took me and my sister Vicky to see Coriolanus at the National Theatre, starring Ian McKellen and directed by Peter Hall. It's hard to convey how formative an experience this was to us. Perhaps it's enough to say that my sister Vicky now has got a very good job in theatre, and my brother is a music producer. Throughout this impressive drive to educate us artistically, television never played second fiddle or was viewed with snobbery. It was integral to our cultural landscape. It was a shared experience, and my parents loved watching TV with us. From Blake Seven to Only Fools and Horses, from Doctor Who to Morecambe and Wise, Angels to, God, I really loved Angels. Does anyone else remember that show? Yep, television was my most enduring love, due in a large part to its accessibility, its presence at home, its currency at school, a font of water cooler moments long before I'd heard of water coolers. The connection it created with family and friends, the availability of quality viewing, I loved those quality mainstream shows. And I believe those shows and their successors are the most important cultural force for unity and shared conversations we have. They were important then, and they are even more important now, given the increasingly fractured, fragmented, atomized world in which we live. A world in which the country seems so polarized along ideological lines, divided and dislocated. Political stalemates apparently intractable. Not so much open dialogue as shrill shouting. 52% versus 48%. Now, more than ever, we need television dramatists to tell us stories that challenge us, unite us, remind us of the ties that bind, recall that fundamental truth that there is more that we have in common than not. Intimate and epic stories that help us understand our place in the world. Great state-of-the-nation stories with a voice and a purpose. Edge of Darkness to the Moorside, prime suspect to Happy Valley. Stories told in recent years by Chris Chibnall, Paul Abbott, Linda LaPlante, Jimmy McGovern, Victoria Wood, Sally Wainwright, Russell T. Davies, and many others like them. And I will be here literally all night if I try and name-check all of them. Writers who examine our feelings for us. They fight for us, they love us, they see us. And they hope for us. They take the chaos of human experience and give us back understanding. That's what drew me to TV as a child, and it's what keeps me making it now. And truly, I feel privileged on a daily basis to spend so much of my time with writers. Yet now, more than ever, that vital possibility, shared stories told on mainstream television, is at risk. If storytelling breeds empathy, which I emphatically believe it does, I hope you can see why I say now we need it more than ever today. What I hope to do in this lecture is outline that risk, reframe it as a challenge, and, like any good producer, give it some notes as to what we might do to actually meet that challenge. I, for one, am not afraid of it, and indeed, I'd say I'm excited by it, but I want to be ready. We can choose either to bury our heads in the sand and hope for the best, or we can rise to the challenge and make a better future starting now. First off, we have to stop being snobs about the mainstream. Also, we have to find and fund new ways to meaningfully support, train, and develop a new generation of inspiring great writers. We have to fight the forces that demean and diminish the importance of the arts and culture in our children's educations. Because we need that pipeline from childhood to screenwriter to be unbroken and accessible. So we must apply political pressure and also take on personal responsibility. This is an opportunity for us all to invest in what comes next for our industry, our culture, and our society. This is a long game. We need to play it far, far better, and we need to do so urgently. So, it won't be news to any of you that it's boom time for scripted. So far, this seems to have been good news all round for the UK. for audiences, for the industry, and most definitely for the producers. But we need to understand that so far, this success has been heavily subsidised in one form or another. Whether it's the UK tax break that's driven up budgets, or virtual advertiser monopolies in free-to-air commercial TV, or hefty deficits from distributors, or the high-end returning drama series and soaps that have provided nursery slopes for writers, directors, and producers, courtesy of public service broadcasting. Because the BBC's role in discovering, nurturing, and showcasing new talent cannot and should not be underestimated. While pressure on the licence fee will continue and partisan press persecution of the corporation shows no sign of abating, I say again what has been said before: leave the BBC alone. It is, along with the NHS, one of the great British institutions that is testament to our national character. Channel 4, ITV and Sky each invest in their own way, which speak to their individual needs, be they public, commercial, advertising, revenue from sports, or whatever. They have also made substantial contributions to new talent and diversity schemes and investment in drama, resulting in the emergence of talent like Jack Thorne and Michaela Cole, and big series like Ackley Bridge, Fortitude, and Strike Back. When I talk about the quality mainstream, it is to this ecology that I refer. An ecology that's brought forth shows like Criminal Justice and Call the Midwife, At Home with the Braithwaites, Unforgotten, and Line of Duty. Shows that demonstrate creative excellence and respect for their audience. To me, mainstream is about a connection with an audience, often a live viewing experience such as Dr. Foster, Liar, or Little Boy Blue, which results in a shared dialogue at work the next day. I always believe with Broadchurch that the whodunit element was the tool the public used to discuss the show the next day, but the reason they came back wasn't really to find out who did it, although I grant you that was part of it, but because they loved experiencing the feelings it evoked when they watched it. Feelings created by an author at the top of his game, Chris Chibnall, and actors at the top of theirs, David Tennant and Olivia Colman, or should I say Her Majesty. With such a rich and diverse ecology of creative brilliance, is it little wonder then that we have recently greeted new and intrepid visitors, keen to explore and draw on our resources, which is where the irreversible and dynamic change comes in. We're now living in a world of hugely increased and increasing competition from the 500, yes, 500 subscription video on demand and over-the-top services, SVOD and OTT. Chief among these are Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, and Google, or to give them their Bond villain name, FANG. It's an acronym. Very apt for the night before Halloween as well, I think. So these arrivals have brought with them a new form of subsidy, a stream of money from US broadcasters and from FANG's own apparently bottomless pockets. Budgets have escalated, demand for on-screen named talent and behind-the-scenes A-listers is sky high. Co-production has been a buzzword for the last 5 years. Entire conferences have been devoted to it, and let's be honest, we've all fallen asleep at a few of them. Already, some shows on the BBC are funded 80% by Netflix, and many more have around 20 to 30% funding from the likes of HBO or AMC. ITV has followed suit with the recent Netflix-supported Marcella, while Channel 4's Humans was only made possible at all because AMC stepped in. Happy marriages all, but for the occasional tiff over toilet seats left up or where to spend Christmas. Or in reality, who gets the biggest credit and when it's scheduled. Well, and I'm not the first person to say this, that honeymoon period, consider it over. Up until this point, this co-funding has meant relatively subtle changes to the kinds of dramas being commissioned. Perhaps they're a little bigger and more globally facing. Henceforth, that subtlety will be replaced by less nuanced behaviour. We know, because they've told us, that the SVODs are going to start ramping up commissioning of only fully owned original programmes, meaning that they won't need to co-produce anymore. Why keep investing in shows where they don't own the territory most likely to make that show a hit? It doesn't make sense for them. The co-production tap is going to be turned off or at least reduced to a trickle. It's already happening with The Crown and The Innocents, and I reckon we have a year or 18 months before the big FANG players stop co-producing entirely, except maybe for very specific talent-driven content. With such deep pockets to reach into, why go through the hassle of sharing with traditional British broadcasters? This talent shift is already happening elsewhere. We know that Shonda Rhimes, the US powerhouse creator and producer, whose huge hits, Grey's Anatomy, Scandal, and How to Get Away with Murder, graced the free-to-air network ABC, has jumped ship to Netflix. More will follow. and what will follow that will be a slow, or not so slow, starvation of the quality mainstream on free-to-air platforms and channels. While networks waste away, Netflix is fighting fit. Some great mainstream TV will emerge, of that I am certain. They will be the first truly global channel, a very canny move. Canny for them, good for producers, but what are the consequences for our creative ecology? Imagine a world in which Sally Wainwright worked exclusively for Apple, or you could only watch Pete Bowker's output on Netflix, or Mike Bartlett was Amazon only. Because exclusivity will be the next stage of this battle for talent. Our system of writers working on 3 or 4 things at once isn't going to fly in the new world. Here we have the threat we must address, or as I like to see it, the challenge we must rise to. How do we nurture our mainstream storytelling, its producers and platforms, while engaging collaboratively and creatively with the new reality, not isolationist, but involved? Does it matter, you ask? If the writers are still writing somewhere, it's fine, isn't it? But the cold, hard truth is that we don't yet have the depth of storytelling talent to lose Sally, Pete, or Mike from free-to-air BBC, Channel 4, or ITV. We simply don't have enough to go around. So we must take a similarly cold look at ourselves and look at what we can do to be ready for what's coming. At the recent mosh pit that is the TV marketplace MIPCOM, you've all been there, everyone was talking about global shows. Looking around the market, all you could see were thrillers, period dramas, and branded worlds. Now, I've been guilty of making 1 or 2 thrillers. I like to think maybe I've made at least one good one, but admittedly, I've made a couple of the shit ones as well. Hunted, anyone? Anyway, no. Sorry, that wasn't in the script. Sorry, everyone. It's not that these genres can't be meaningful, but what struck me at MIPCOM was the absence of almost anything else. I believe that viewers want and need to see their own contemporary world represented. Relevant domestic stories that look at Britain, but also our place in the world, and it's our responsibility to deliver them. If we don't find stories from all corners and cultures of the UK in all its diverse glory and tell them in the mainstream, the audience fragments and fractures further. They retreat to niches. And if the last 3 years in public life, its referenda and elections, have taught us anything, it's that there's danger in living in echo chambers, and media bubbles foster division when we need common conversations and spaces. So this process, and it is a process that should always be ongoing, starts with fostering talent. Much of our new talent, writers, directors, producers, and actors, have spent their time watching US box sets, being influenced in their programming tastes by Master of None, Breaking Bad, and The Goddamn Wire. This diet of long-form, articulate storytelling has played a brilliant role in raising the quality aspirations of this group, but it has also resulted in a gradual readjustment of our industry's narrative focus from the mainstream to the niche. The new platforms offer creative freedom, bigger budgets, and the associated glory of being part of something fresh and cool. I truly believe that more competition is a good thing. It means more choice for the audience, and quality will win. But if all our talent chooses to work outside of the mainstream, and our existing mainstream stars slowly migrate to other platforms, are we refilling the well quickly enough to replace that talent, so that mainstream stories will still be told across all platforms? Because if you think it's challenging getting the best talent now, imagine what it's going to be like when 15 more scripted series a year are being commissioned out of the UK. So, we need to nurture it from all our corners and cultures. That means more women. Oh, yes. We might like to think we've got that covered with female leads in Doctor Who and Dr. Foster, with Sharon Horgan and Phoebe Waller-Bridge blazing trails, but really, we haven't. It's also a class issue, and it's an issue of ethnic diversity. It's an out-of-London issue. How can we hope to talk to the British people about their lives if no one who creates the nation's most popular stories has lived their experiences? We have to engage with the popular mood and investigate it to tell relevant and compelling stories. Just as Cracker discussed Hillsborough in front of millions, just as Spooks discussed radicalisation, just as Humans looked at AI taking people's jobs. We need big shows that deal with inequality, representation, abuses of power, Britain's identity crisis, the NHS, our political system, the crisis of masculinity, the new battles over race and gender. And at the moment, there aren't enough people wanting to tell big, complex stories about big issues slap bang in the middle of the mainstream. We seem to be confining our taste in stories which examine the popular mood to factual dramas. Thank God for the great Jeff Pope. But why aren't as many new writers telling more fictional stories that entertain us and make us think? Well, for one thing, I suspect it may be harder to make popular quality work than to deliver something your peers will like. But I would also ask, is it partly our fault as the gatekeepers of the ideas? Might it be our snobbery? Have our tastes shifted too, along with the writers? Because that is a dangerous way of thinking that has in part led to the point we're at today, where we could be seen as disrespecting the audience by underestimating the audience. We do this at our peril. After a highly instructive stint with Denise and Jimmy at Hattrick, and then a few months with Tony Garnett, where I watched the birth of The Great Cardiac Arrest and This Life, and was in awe of every day of the man who'd made the era-defining Cathy Come Home, I produced Touching Evil. It was the first original series from Paul Abbott, who was on his way from Coronation Street via Cracker to becoming one of the greatest TV dramatists of his age. Working with Paul taught me many things. The first was how to use a fax machine, because that's how I received the script, page by agonizing page, on Christmas Eve after everyone else had gone home. The second was the importance of the audience. Paul Abbott respects and listens to the audience at all times. He's one of the least snobby people I know, and I have ever come across in this industry. He knows that the mainstream audience are highly sophisticated and intelligent. For its time, in putting a thoroughly flawed hero at its heart, Touching Evil was innovative, bold, and primetime, and it got 13 million viewers on ITV. There were new writers. Paul made sure that Russell T Davies wrote one of the Touching Evil scripts, and new directors, including Julian Jarrell and Mark Munden, and a brilliant young actor, Nicola Walker. While the growth of cable and OTT services and their influence on our industry has perhaps perpetuated a myth that quality must sit on the fringes and populism is bad, I firmly believe you can innovate, be bold, be creative, be entertaining, and be excellent right in the middle, where the most number of people will find the work you've done. You just have to have the faith to do it. Faith in the audience and faith in the writer to connect with that audience. Many of the writers of Paul's generation, and earlier ones, Kay Mellor, Jimmy McGovern, Russell T Davies, Ashley Farrow, Matthew Graham, and Tony Jordan, for example, had honed their ability to connect with the audience by coming through the writers' rooms of Corrie, Brookside, EastEnders, Holby, and Casualty. Rooms which provided a safe and structured world to learn the craft and tell mainstream stories directly to the audience, and somehow nurtured distinctive voices throughout. Great TV begat great TV. The soaps and continuing drama series are still producing some great writers, but not in the quantity they were. Maybe because we're being too snobby about the talent there. Maybe because many new writers want to work on a US show for Hulu instead. Maybe it's a combination of both. Regardless, the power of the soaps is waning, and we need to look to additional sources to find the next generation of Paul Abbotts and Kay Mellors. As it stands, we may not be doing enough. The current fashion for single writer-authored series, such as Line of Duty, The Missing, and The A Word, has led to a place where there are hardly any opportunities for writers to train on mainstream series anymore. We do have a few new writer-style rooms emerging, particularly on the big Sky shows, and this will begin to fill the gap to a degree, but too slowly. Many of these shows are serialized and do not easily allow writers to own an episode in the way that they used to with Life on Mars or Hustle. I barely want to think of the average age of the dominant writers and producers working in the mainstream now, me included. But as we, the TV industry, has been slowly and inextricably moving away from the mainstream, we have found it harder and harder to attract the writers who love writing mainstream TV like we love watching it. Who will make us sit up and take the world seriously through entertaining us? One thing has always been true since stories began. The best writers have something to say, and they want to tell their stories to as many people as possible, don't they? Even if they sometimes pretend they don't. We're going to run a little sketch for you to watch now.
Hey.
Oh, hey.
Meeting?
Yeah, series idea.
Huh? What?
It's kind of an imagined parallel present where a man makes a pact with the devil, kind of thing. It's a good buzz.
Good. Great.
Thanks.
Oh, did you see
I
the...
caught a bit of the last episode, a bit. I think he was threatening to jump and she was talking him down.
Yeah, like anyone...
Like anyone cares. You watched it?
Every episode.
Well, you have to, don't you?
Hate it.
Yeah, I could plot it in my sleep.
It's getting 9 million. They're ready for you. He didn't jump, by the way.
What, but she still marries the other guy? What, even though it jeopardizes the country and the future of the throne? Oh, brutal. I have to watch it on catch-up. If I get the time.
Sounds good, that show. So storytellers are out there, and we need to work out how to usher them through and offer them an exciting platform for telling new stories so that they can be supported in going after the 9 million. It's the stage from baby writer to star that's hard. One of our sources of writing talent is theatre, specifically subsidised theatre, which is one of the only sources of new playwrights in this country. Why is it so successful at finding new voices? In part because it doesn't cost as much, so it's easier to take risks on new talent, but for them, as a percentage of their budget, it's just as risky. For writers, the benefit of theatre is clear. Proper development time, with authorial voices finding a supported route through to an audience. Whether it be fringe theatre, rehearsed readings, or workshops, writers are desperate to see their work performed. They don't want to work in a vacuum. Writers like Lucy Kirkwood, Nick Payne, Charlene James. The team at Sister and I are now working on a couple of series for mainstream BBC One and ITV1. The first is The Split by my friend, collaborator, and playwright Abby Morgan. It's about 4 women still dealing with the legacy of divorce 30 years on. The second is Clean Break by Mark Marlowe. This represents Mark's first ever transmitted script, let alone series. He and the young director, Lewis Arnold, brought me an idea about a cleaner who worked in Canary Wharf. The audience will decide if these ideas end up being popular, but all I know is that we've tried to make contemporary, moving, funny pieces that are inclusive, whilst examining complex issues of family splits, modern marriages, class, identity, inequality, and opportunity. The ideas for both have been gently nurtured over time. Indeed, the first meeting with Mark went a little bit like this.
So, first off, can I just say, everybody here loves what you've done.
Really? Oh, thank you. Obviously, it's the first time that I've written an outline for anything, so you really think it has legs?
Legs? This is a bloody millipede. It's great. The characters are just really there. They're just very present in this narrative.
Right.
So it's set in 2099 in the heavens.
Yes, and tensions are rising between the oldest war gods, Bellona and Nerio. And then there's Samson, who is a mortal man, a jet mechanic, and he's the only person who can save Earth. Now, I see it as a sort of allegory for the rise of the far right.
And I love the boldness of that, so distinctive. But I do just have one small note, and it's not even a note, really. It's basically a semiquaver. Is a commissioner going to get it?
Get it?
If I pop my commissioner's hat on just for a second, I wonder, does it not feel a bit risky to greenlight such an unusual idea from someone so, well, green? I wonder if we just make a few small tweaks to location, tone, and plot, whether we'll have a real chance of getting this thing away. What do you think?
Well, I've never done anything like this, so
I just wonder if 2099 doesn't feel a bit too far in the future. What if we set it now?
Well, then Samson wouldn't be a jet mechanic, obviously. I mean, I guess he could work in a garage.
Exactly. And the whole set in the heavens thing, obviously don't feel bound by anything I say because it's absolutely your vision. Okay. But might it be interesting if we were to set it somewhere like Wolverhampton?
Wolverhampton.
Wolverhampton works for me. And finally, those lovely war gods of yours.
Bellona and Nerio.
Could they be Brian and Natalie? 2 gritty cops pounding the streets of the Sink Estate.
Brian and Natalie.
God, it's so refreshing to work with new writers like yourself. So, it's Friday now, and this stuff is just all surface, really, isn't it? It won't take any time at all. So how about you have a think, have a play around, and then get something over to me on Monday? What do you say?
That's not really how we work with new writers at Sister. I love working with new writers. In 2000, I'd recently joined Stephen Garrett at Kudos, and we were working with a gifted young writer, David Waltoncroft, on a show called Spooks. I was lucky that this all coincided with Lorraine Heggessy arriving as controller of BBC One. Lorraine felt that the mainstream audience was being better served in cinema than TV, how things have changed, and that the BBC had to rise to the challenge of offering a cinematic experience at home. Lorraine tasked Jane Tranter and Gareth Neame with finding dramas with the scope of a movie, but that could be viewed in your pyjamas from the comfort of your own sofa. Luckily, Spooks, a spy show with ambition, met all those criteria. What I felt we didn't have, right after we were commissioned, was an extra voice, a writer with a political viewpoint, not just experience in genre thriller. I wanted someone who could examine our place in the world. The brilliant agent Mel Kenyon at Casarotto suggested Howard Brenton, a hero of mine for his brilliant stage writing. I couldn't believe that this man of such revolutionary spirit might want to come and work on our show, but it turns out he did, and it was a turning point. The combination of him and David and our third writer, Simon Mirren, in our mini writer's room was very potent and very magnetic to talent, including acting talent, especially Matthew McFadden, David Oyelowo and Keeley Hawes. I hear they're all doing okay these days. Spooks dealt with complex post-9/11 stories in a way that was thrilling, moving, and deeply political. The writers and directors who came through the Spooks stable were a diverse bunch. Barrett Naluri, Justin Chadwick, Ben Richards, Zinni Harris, Neil Cross, David Farr, Dennis Kelly, Sam Vincent, and John Brackley. They've also done pretty well between them too. So, subsidised political theatre helped attract millions of viewers to BBC One. These days, we're all pilfering from theatre's heartland. Every producer, or more likely a member of their development team, spends their lives scouring the theatres for the next Jez Butterworth. At a recent opening night of Touch by Vicky Jones, there were so many producers there, it was like a MIPCOM flashback without the ludicrous drink spill. So, we've taken a lot, and now I believe it's time to start giving back. As I've mentioned, at Kudos, we use Spooks, Hustle, and Life on Mars, amongst others, to mentor new talent. And at Sister, new writers are at the heart of what we're doing. 4 of our new commissions are being written by first-time series creators, including Joe Barton and Desiree Akivam. And we're developing with several more writers at the start of their career, including Mika Watkins, Will Sharp, Adam Kay, and Laura Dealey. We also financially support a number of new writing theatres and build relationships with them as we all look for ways of nurturing writers. Most non-televisual creative organisations do community work, museums, galleries, theatres. I don't know if it's because TV doesn't quite see itself as having true artistic merit yet, and really it should, given the quality of much of the work. But TV companies don't do enough. We need to step up. The UK-based studios, indies and buyers need to dig into their pockets, free up their diaries and open doors. I wonder sometimes if producers and UK-based studios have been let off the hook somewhat by paying our levy into Skillset. Don't get me wrong, Skillset do a remarkable and important job through their various apprentice and new talent schemes, and we should continue to pay our levies with gusto. But I am worried that sometimes it's a bit like paying a direct debit to a charity. Guilt is assuaged, and we don't have to really deal with the problem. The BBC Writers' Room and Channel 4's screenwriting programme do excellent grassroots work. But what happens when they pass their talent over to us? Ditto the Sky Short series and their leadership and diversity. The ITV Continuing Drama Writers Scheme and BAFTA's own Elevate programme for female directors. Then there's also the recent Skillset scheme established by Brian Elsley to train newer writers to be more robust and educated about how TV works. These are all properly brilliant, but we need to engage more, much, much more. As singular authorship continues to dominate the commissions, we need to think very carefully about how we move the talent from these schemes to commissioned work and how we develop them. Let's put a junior writer on every series by a single author to learn, help, proof, listen, maybe write a little, but above all, to be mentored and on a salary. No more having to write 6 treatments for free. And those writers who shine so brightly as they emerge from the schemes need guidance and protection, because the best are often swamped with meetings and interest from production companies, mine included, and often begin too many relationships, burning out their ideas before they've fully developed. My advice would be, find a great agent who will help you find 1 or 2 expert practitioners and let them shield and guide you. I believe we need to allow time and money when we work with new writers. They cannot be expected to find perfect expression for their voice straight away, every time. And we have to make sure we don't crush them on the way. This is simply the cost of good research and development, investing in the future. We need to help them learn what it means to really write in TV, under pressure, big budgets, a demanding audience. Which is why at Sister, I'm proud to announce we're establishing a writer-in-residence programme, which I know a couple of other indies already have underway. Perhaps we can start a trend. My team and I will endeavour to open every door to this writer, and at the end of the time, maybe they will even have a script or an idea they can be proud of. But above all, they will be working in the real world, well, the real TV world anyway. We also sponsor a scholarship student at the NFTS and will continue to look for other ways to engage. I fear I sound a bit like a do-gooder, but really, what's so wrong with doing good? I strongly believe in giving back. I wouldn't be here today where I am without the opportunities the others presented me with, without the investment others put in me. I wouldn't be the person I am today without them, and nor would you. So I urge the newer players in the market, the FANGs, to make the connection between the great talent we have here in Britain and the foundation on which their opportunities have been provided. Subsidised theatre, the talent schemes, public service broadcasting and education. I know that these buyers pay into the skill set levy through the productions they pay for, but what would it look like if Netflix sponsored scholarships at the NFTS, for example? Or if Apple chose to invest in new writing theatres, such as the Everyman in Liverpool, Edinburgh's Travers Theatre or the Royal Court? Or if YouTube funded a scheme to place 5 new writers in production companies for a year? It is vital to nurture and progress new talent because there is not enough to go around. And if my airy-fairy reasons aren't enough, which they are, by the way, there is also an unassailable business case for taking the nurturing of talent seriously. According to Sir Peter Bazalgette in his recent review, the creative industries could reach a gross value to our country of £128 billion by 2025. 128 billion. Even if you just measure the success of TV storytelling in cold cash and not in the empathy it encourages or the understanding it can promote, it pays to invest in it. It makes moral and commercial sense. To give the next generation and the generation after them real opportunities. Opportunities that, when they presented themselves to us, we took, sometimes gratefully and sometimes for granted. Because those generations are already being deprived of opportunities to reach their full potential by the very system that is meant to enable them. So far, I've talked about our industry's responsibility in finding and fostering new creative talent, nurturing new commentators skilled enough to ask big questions in entertaining, dramatic ways. Now, I'm going to shamelessly use this platform that BAFTA have so kindly lent me for this evening to highlight a pressing issue that I feel extremely passionately about. The calculated, ideologically motivated, shocking way that the government is shoddily treating creativity in the education system. It's a deprivation of opportunities for children to reach their full potential as human beings. It is unjust and it needs to be challenged. So here's a party political broadcast.
Come in. Ali, hi. What's on your mind?
Oh, thanks, Sam. Yeah, I was looking at the course schedule, and it looks like there's only one day spent on the whole of art. And music and drama, and I know it's not that important, but dance.
Yes.
One day in 190 days of primary teacher training?
Yep, one whole day. Some say the arts don't deserve a whole 190th of the course, but not me. Then again, I've always been a bit of a hippie.
But how's that even possible?
Simple, really. First, I do a potted overview of the history of art. Then we go straight into prehistoric and ancient at 9:01 until 9:04. Nothing really happened in the Dark Ages, so it's quite a good time for a loo break.
But you can't do the whole of history of art in less than a minute.
Starts with cave paintings 40,000 years ago. Gets better, lots of nice pots, a few naughty statues, a billion paintings of grapes, then Expressionism, Impressionism, shark in a tank, bosh.
But what about Picasso?
We could throw in a minute on Cubism, if we skip theatre. I mean, if you just imagine that my eyes are on my chin, you're pretty much there already.
Yeah, but I've got this boy in my training class who makes these beautiful little clay figures. How can I teach him if I've only had 7 seconds of sculpture? Like, he could be the next Michelangelo. The artist. He sculpted David. He painted the Sistine Chapel.
Sorry, a bit hazy on all that. Had a cold on my own arts day, sneezed and missed the Renaissance.
And there we have it. Only this one is no joke. This is all true. Young teachers studying to work in primary schools have a training programme of 190 days across a year, where they are required to learn all the disciplines needed to teach children from age 4 to 11. Of course, this includes maths, English, IPC, and PHSEE. As you've learned, though, of the 190 days training, only one day is dedicated to the quartet of art, music, dance, and drama. 1. That is how much our government, and it seems our country, values creativity in education. How dare they undervalue our culture so much? On September the 30th, 2011, a highly successful initiative called the Creative Partnership, designed by the organisation CCE, or Creativity, Culture and Education, was closed down. This programme was set up to develop the creative skills and outlook of children across England. It raised their aspirations and opened up doors for their futures. It supported thousands of long-term partnerships between schools and creative professionals, including architects, musicians, artists, multimedia developers, and scientists. It touched the lives of 1 million children across 5,000 schools. Quite apart from the engagement the children found by working with creative professionals, they were 10 times more likely to tell their parents about what they'd done that day if they didn't engage with the scheme. Schools showed significant improvements in behaviour and attendance, all directly attributable to this scheme. As I understand it, the government withdrew funding from the Arts Council for this scheme as a political act. Ideology disguised as austerity, denying an entire generation of children the opportunity to benefit from a fully rounded education. The Creative Industries Federation and the Cultural Learning Alliance are all still active in this area, in lobbying and connecting organisations and businesses to education. But our industry needs to start shouting too if we want a healthy talent pool in 10 years' time. We better do everything we can now to put the education of art back at the top table. Again, the long game needs to start now. Until the 130 accountability measures by which schools are judged include even one arts one, we have no chance. Creativity in schools makes happier pupils who work harder, are more likely to succeed, and will eventually help drive growth in our sector and other sectors. It's not hard. In the future, and I know this from humans, the only thing computers won't be able to do is be creative. This is a thing we should be nourishing above all others. I now feel compelled to ask how we let this happen, and how can we as an industry take our place in the lineup of creative industries and start supporting the really grassroots level. Lobby our politicians, make a drama about it, adopt a school. Because the result of not doing this will be that the human cultural pipeline will become ever narrower. The growing gap between the haves and the have-nots will become a chasm. This is exacerbated by private schools continuing to offer a range of cultural experiences and education, as opposed to the state sector where these things have been cut in pursuit of austerity or the EBAC school rating system, which only measures success in the so-called core subjects. But just one afternoon in the theatre could make all the difference to someone's interest in the arts. Think of the child aged 6 who gets taken by their school to see a performance of Alice in Wonderland. By age 8, this has fueled their imagination to write a story about a child who has an imaginary life. By age 9, they know all the words to all the Horrible Histories songs. By age 18, they've left school and they're working in the local supermarket and doing an evening class in creative writing. By age 23, they've sent a script to the local theatre, which, by the way, has enough funding in my own imaginary world to have a literary department which has time to read all the submissions. At age 24, this writer is on a new talent programme, and by age 28 has a new play on at the Bolton Octagon. And as soon as one of the producers in this room hears there's a new voice on the scene, that writer's hauled in, signed up, and set running. Within a few years, a new series is born, a new commentator, to tell us stories about our world and our lives. It's a lovely story, isn't it? And I bet every single one of you sees something of yourself in that writer. Something inspired you, something brought you to where you are today. Opportunity and investment, work and luck. That alchemical combination. So, we are the grown-ups now. We're not, I'm waiting for my movie to happen, but I'm doing TV in the meantime. We're not purveying guilty pleasures. We are not a cottage industry. We are a dynamic, resourceful, brilliant, creative business. We have and always have had the best storytellers in the world. And I feel lucky on a daily basis to be doing this job, which I love so much. We're entering a new age where choice, fragmentation, and global players will dominate. We will survive and thrive in this new age if we work in service to the most important people in this conversation, the audience. They will choose where and when and how they watch our content. But it falls to us, the drama industry that is powered by writers, to provide the means and the platform for talent to write big, state-of-the-nation, funny, entertaining, relevant, moving, and innovative dramas in the mainstream, linear and SVOD. for big audiences at the highest level of quality. And we must not assume or expect that this will happen automatically. As an industry, we must engage with the tools needed to facilitate this in the best possible way and to provide the next generation with a storytelling world where their preoccupations and concerns are explored in a way that grabs them by the heart. The route from new to star has to be taken seriously and allowed time and money, patience and process. So let's invest ourselves. Let's build in that time and money to commissioning and budgeting. It's not a luxury, it's essential. Let's encourage our new writers to write in the mainstream by allowing their innovation. Let's ask the FANGs to contribute to the cultural pot to help refill the well. They can work out how they do it, but please do it. Let's pester Philip Hammond and Justine Greening to give schools back their budgets for arts. This path may not be easy. Hell, it will not be easy. But I am an optimist. I have hope. Hope that you'll do it, because to do otherwise doesn't sit right with you. Because you're inspired to, because you have been inspired to. Because the opportunity to do it is there. Because if you're like me, you understand that creative excellence doesn't live in a vacuum. It is not an individual achievement. It is the consequence of 1,000 decisions made by many people. 500 of those decisions may well have been wrong at the point they were made, but they were necessary to the process and were corrected or improved over time. This cooperative process produces creative excellence. Creativity isn't yours or mine, it's ours. It's shared. It's in the connections between us. Because we are connected, we're human beings. We exist in relation to each other. If stories and storytellers teach us anything, it's surely that. Thank you.